Mark Allen here. Welcome to the Mark Allen Coaching Zwift Group live chat, coming to you from the shed where I record all of my shed talks. If you haven't seen them recently, I've been doing a series called Things You May Not Know. And I talk about just little topics around sport and training that are little tidbits that maybe you haven't heard before. Anyway, those are posting every Tuesday on Facebook on the Mark Allen Coaching Facebook page. And then Thursdays, I've been actually posting a story from each of the years of my Ironmans that I was at. So there's 14 stories in that series. We're about halfway through it right now. So check that out. All those stories are on my coaching website, markallencoaching.com. Anyway, welcome to the live chat today. Just a workout update from my end. I actually did my first brick workout that I've done in, I don't know, a lot of years, let me tell you. I don't really need a brick workout for any particular reason, but today it felt perfect. I rode on Zwift and then threw on the running shoes, went running. It was great. Surf was small, very crowded, so that wasn't calling me. Anyway, today on the live chat, I'm going to talk about tapering because a lot of you I know are having your races, big races coming up either very soon or in a few months. You probably have a lot of lead up races going into them. And so I'd just like to talk about how you actually taper down for different distance races, different importance races with different importance, priorities in your schedule. And then hopefully give you a real understanding of what to expect and what to feel, because a short taper is going to be different than a long taper in terms of how fresh and rested you will get, but also the way that you feel as you go through different length tapers is going to be very different. Just a background, a number of years ago when I was racing, toward the end of my career actually, there was a big study that came out that was done in Europe, and the study was looking at endurance athletes, runners, cyclists, triathletes, and seeing where they were in terms of overall freshness and recovered energy-wise in their body when they were tapering down to really big events. And the study found that pretty much across the board, almost over 90% of the athletes went into their biggest race of the year still slightly overtrained, meaning that they were not getting a long enough taper to actually really recharge from doing a huge block of training. And the average sort of taper down length for a very big important endurance event was about 3 weeks. And they found that actually if an athlete starts to taper down from their peak of training at about 4 weeks from their big race, then they actually arrive at their biggest race perfectly fresh, charged up, ready to go, and they have their best performances ever. I didn't realize this. I didn't understand this until my final Ironman in 1995. And I'll tell that story later on what happened in that race. But that was the first year that I actually followed this kind of a little bit longer protocol. But let's take a look at just different priority races, different length events that you might be competing in. Generally, most races that you're going to do throughout the summer, you're either going to have about a 4-day taper or about a 10-day taper. What does a 4-day taper look like? Well, basically, if you are racing on Sunday, pretty much from Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday on, starting on Wednesday, everything's going to be cut way back. You won't be doing anything fast. You're just activating the muscles, doing things to keep all of your fitness going, but you won't do anything long, you won't do anything fast in those final 4 days. You may do some brief accelerations in each sport where you're accelerating up to race pace over a period of 10 seconds. And when you do that, you can do like 5 times 10 seconds or 8 times 10 seconds, where you just accelerate from easy up to race pace and then you drop it back down. Go easy till you feel yourself completely recovered. Do another one. That activates all of the fast twitch muscles, but it doesn't build up lactate. And that's perfect for getting ready for a race that's low to medium priority, especially if it's a shorter event like an Olympic distance, a sprint distance. That 4-day taper is really good. That's what I would do pretty much all for almost all of my Olympic distance races. If it was a really big Olympic distance race, I would actually do a 10-day taper. And what does a 10-day taper look like? Well, starting around Thursday or Friday, the week before the race, that's when you cut back on your overall volume and your intensity. You normally everybody does their long workouts on the weekend, right? So you maybe do a long ride on Saturdays, a long run on Sundays. 8-9 days out from the race, you're going to cut those at least in half, because the week later, when you have that big race, you want to be fresh. And if you've done a long weekend the weekend before, oftentimes people will not be fresh enough to actually optimize their performance in the race. And let me make one quick aside here. A lot of people, that I coach, they say, oh, I'm just going to train through this race, meaning they don't want to taper. They don't want to miss those long workouts the weekend before. They don't want to miss their midweek sort of medium range workouts. They don't want to miss a speed work session on Thursday or Friday that they have on their calendar. But then when they go to the race, it's not really a race. Sure, there's anticipation. You're going to go harder than you would in basically a training session by yourself, but it's not getting the real benefit of racing. There's two things that are really good about racing. One is that it does help bump your fitness up if you're fresh enough to go really hard. And the second thing is that it trains your mind to be able to manage how to race hard. Okay, it's one thing to go hard in training when it's just you and your training partners and there's no pressure other than just it's a hard workout. It's very different when you're in a race and you are giving it your best effort. If you're training through a race, it sort of takes that edge off that you have to learn how to deal with when you race. So anytime you race, it's always good to do some kind of taper. Again, if you're doing, let's say, an Olympic or a sprint distance race, and it's low to medium priority in your overall schedule, 4 days is great. Start on that Wednesday, cut everything down, cut out any speed work that you have remaining in the rest of the week. Don't feel like you have to make up for that long bike or long run that you might be missing on the weekend, because you are racing, and that will give you huge fitness gains. If that Olympic distance race or sprint race, or if you have a half Ironman distance race coming up, a 10-day taper is much better. So you can start Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the week before, cutting everything back. The long workouts that you normally do on the weekend, cut those in half so that you're not getting overly tired and you're not having to recover from that weekend. It's just the weekend before that race, it's just activating your endurance without stressing your body. Okay, and then throughout that week, early in the week, you can do a very short swim, bike, run, speed session. Again, keep it very, very short. One of my favorite, if I'm doing a 10-day taper like that and I want to do, let's say, something a little sharpening, what I will do running is I'll just go to the track, warm up, and I will do 1 mile of straights and curves. Straights and curves are where you jog the curve, and then when you get to the straight part of the track, you accelerate and accelerate up to race pace, and then slow it down, pick it up on the straight, jog on the curve. So it's fast on the straights, jogging slowly on the curves. I'll do a mile and a half, and it doesn't build up a lot of lactate, it doesn't stress your body that much, but it really activates that firing mechanism in your muscles. You can do something similar on the bike. You can do 30-second to 1 minute accelerations up to race pace, or even a little bit faster, and then do easy spinning in between those. Do 4 to 6 of those, and that's a great just sort of sharpening tool that you can do like on Tuesday for a weekend race that's coming up. 4-day, 10-day, those are the most common tapers that you'll see. Now here's the catch. A lot of people, when they're trying to qualify, let's say for Ironman in Hawaii or any big race, they will go into their qualifying race by tapering down that last week before the event, maybe even starting the weekend before, like I suggested. So they do 1 week, okay? They feel great. They had an amazing race. They do an 8 or 10-day taper, perfectly done, they qualify for, let's say, Kona, and then they think, okay, for my qualifying race, I really tapered down 1 week. So for the big race, I'm going to taper 2 weeks. This is what happens, okay? When you start to taper down, meaning you're cutting your workouts back, you're cutting back on the volume and on the intensity, your body at first doesn't know that you're giving it a rest. And so It's staying charged up and sort of like on alert, waiting for that next hard workout. Well, after about a week and a half, your body all of a sudden realizes, wait a minute, you aren't testing me anymore. You are really giving me a chance to just put all that energy back into my body that I put out when I was getting fit. And so all of a sudden, your body starts to really shut down. All of a sudden, you don't want to go hard. You don't want to go long. You can feel sluggish. You can feel flat. You can feel exhausted and tired. This is your body super regenerating. It's going into super regeneration mode, super recovery mode. And that happens after about a week and a half of really cutting back on your volume and your intensity. So if you do a 2-week taper, that's going to be right at the point where all of a sudden your body's just trying to go inside. And when you race 2 weeks out from that start of that taper, that's about the worst point that you can possibly race. After about 3 weeks into this taper, week and a half, the 2.5 to 3 weeks, all of a sudden your energy will come back up. And if you've done a 4-week taper, you'll really realize that, yeah, it does take about 4 weeks of gradually cutting back the intensity and the volume to actually supercharge your body so that you're ready for that great race. Now there's a catch to this 4-week taper, and this is again what I did getting ready for the biggest race of the year, the Ironman Triathlon World Championship in Hawaii. It's what you can do for any of your big races, whether it's a 70.3, Olympic, or sprint. The 3 sports, swimming, cycling, and running, don't take quite the same amount of time to actually rebuild, recharge, regenerate, and get ready to go at optimal levels. Running takes the longest. Cycling doesn't take quite as long, and swimming is the easiest to actually get everything ready to go and charge it up. So when I say 4-week taper, it's not going to be 4 weeks for each of those 3 sports. So running, if you're going for your biggest race of the season and there's nothing that you're going to be doing afterwards that you're trying to maintain fitness for, you want to be at your absolute peak. So to get your running at its peak, the longest week of running volume intensity that you have in your buildup should end with 5 weeks to go to that big race. So it actually takes 5 weeks of gradually cutting back on your run training, sharpening, regenerating, keeping the endurance going, but not building anymore, to fully be ready to run fast at your fastest when you get to that race. Cycling takes 4 weeks. Okay, there's less muscle damage, so it just doesn't take quite as long as impact of running does to recover, regenerate, get ready for that big event. Swimming, it has the least amount of muscle tissue damage that needs to take place because your body weight is completely supported by the water. And so a really great swim taper should start 3 weeks out from your biggest race. Okay, so the 3 sports are offset. You start tapering down 5 weeks out from the big race on the run, start tapering down 4 weeks out on the bike, and start tapering down 3 weeks out on the swim. And that is what will get you your best race at the biggest A race that you have, whether it's one that you have in the middle of the summer or one that you have in the fall or whenever it lies in your calendar. Again, I didn't really understand this until my final year that I did Ironman. It was 1995. And that was when I read that study and I thought, okay, if I look back and was realistic, I could tell that even though I'd won Hawaii 5 times, obviously I'm having some pretty good races there, I always felt like I was actually a little bit fresher a week out after the race, meaning if I had tapered 4 weeks, that's when I would have been my freshest. So that study supported what I was starting to sense anyway. So that year I did exactly what I just told you. I started my run tapering 5 weeks out because I talked to a lot of marathon runners and they said, no, 3-4 weeks isn't actually quite enough to be ready to run a marathon. You have to start a little bit further out. So I started the run taper 5 weeks out from Kona, the bike taper 4 weeks out, and then the swim taper 3 weeks out. That was the best Ironman that I ever had. And the way that I want to frame it is that in every one of the Ironmans, even the ones that I won, I had biomechanical breakdown that would happen when I started to fatigue. So I'm on the run, I'm running great, my pace stays the same, but my mechanics start to fall apart a little bit. It's harder to maintain my form. and my feet start to slip in my shoes a little bit because everything isn't as tight and on form as it normally had been when I was fresher in the beginning of the marathon. So as my feet start to slip, my biomechanics are breaking down, things start to get a little bit sloppy, I'm hitting the ground a little bit harder, I'm losing that fluidity, I start to get blisters. And I've had some horrendous blisters during the marathon, in the Ironman, even the years that I won. 1995, my final Ironman, with this 5-4-3 week taper down that I implemented that year, I stayed fresh all the way through the finish line. I never had biomechanical breakdown. I got one tiny little blister on one of my toes, bottom one of my toes, and it was the best biomechanics that I had the entire way through the marathon. It was the freshest that I ever was for the race, the most solid that I'd ever been. It took till my final Ironman win to be able to do that, but at least I figured it out for that one. So keep a few things in mind. If you're doing a 4-day taper, no problem. You just start cutting it back, starting like on Wednesday, drop everything down. You'll feel really good by race day, if providing you haven't dug yourself into a hole before that time. 10-day taper for bigger, higher priority races during the middle of the season. Start Wednesday or Thursday before the race. Cut back on intensity and overall long workout length. You will start to feel fresher each and every day because, again, your body keeps anticipating, thinking that you're tricking it. It's waiting for that next big workout. Well, the next big workout is going to be that race that you have, and you'll be ready for it. If you go for the really long taper, which is what I have all of my athletes do when they are going for their A race at the end of their training blocks, like I said, that first week you're going to feel superhuman because you've been building all this volume, and all of a sudden you drop everything down, but your body's anticipating that it's going to keep at that pace. You feel supercharged. By the end of that second week, though, everything starts to go inside, and you'll feel sluggish. You might feel unmotivated. You feel flat. You are sleeping more. You're tired, and you're thinking, "Oh, I'm getting out of shape." This is the catch. Most people, when they get that feeling like, I'm losing it, I'm losing my fitness, it's 2 weeks out and I've still got 2 weeks to the race, I've got to throw in something hard and fast and strong that I hadn't planned on because I'm losing my fitness. You're not losing your fitness. You're gaining recovery. You're gaining internal energy that can only be built up when you back off. And so just be prepared for that. Be ready, knowing that there's going to be a little stretch in there of 4 or 5, 6 days where you just feel like, I've lost it all. I'm losing it. But by the end of 2.5 or 3 weeks into that taper, all of a sudden you're going to start to feel yourself come back up. And by the end of that 4th week, you're going to be ready to go. Okay? So that's kind of the gist of tapering. It's truly an art. Most athletes don't take enough time. You get in this rhythm of training where you're pushing and you're going and you're building, and maybe even you have recovery weeks where you drop it back a little bit, but you know that the one after that there's going to be a lot more. There's going to be more volume. There might be more speed work, but you're on this roll, this rhythm of going and going and going, and that tapering is throwing everything into 180-degree reverse. You're dropping everything back. You're lowering the amount of speed work you do. You're lowering certainly the volume of training that you're doing, cutting back on your longer workouts, cutting back on even those medium distance workouts that you do throughout the week. And when you do that, it feels awkward. Like all of a sudden, you feel like I didn't do anything. I didn't do enough training. And so sort of the knee-jerk reaction, the knee-jerk thing is to go, okay, no, let me just add in one more long ride before, then I'll really cut back, or let me add in 2 more extra speed works running because, my running isn't quite as good as I hoped that it would be, or it just feels like I'm losing it. You get to that 2 week into the taper thing for that long one, you're feeling flat and you feel like I need to go test myself and make sure that I still have fitness. Resist that. Be smart, be wise. Know that this is what's going to happen. It's sort of like I always tell people, you can't you can't work on the engine of a car when it's running. You have to turn it off and to repair it, to rebuild it. And it's the same with our bodies. To really regenerate, to really put energy back in that was put out during long blocks of training, we need to shut everything down. We need to kind of shut the engine off, at least enough so that we can recover. Certainly, you're not going to lay flat on your back for 2 weeks. You definitely need to keep all the muscles activated, keep the energy systems going through doing some longer stuff, but just not as long as the peak. Same with the speed work. You will need to do speed work to maintain that fast twitch, high-end fitness and muscle firing that you need to go fast in the race. Excuse me. But don't feel like you're going to the well when you do those workouts. Do them strong, do them fast, but save a little bit. The best speed workout you should ever have in your life is during the race, not in the one 2 weeks out or 3 weeks out or the week before the race. Okay? So when you start into your taper, yes, keep up speed work, at least one swim, bike, and run that are very fast during the week, but do it in a very controlled way. So you're not trying to set a PR. It doesn't matter really what your times are on the track or how fast you run that mile on the road. It's just maintaining the activity and the integrity of those fast twitch muscles and keep stimulating that VO2 max to stay up there where you need it to be for the race. Okay? So I hope that gives you some things to think about with tapering. Again, most people don't do it right. They can't resist doing that one extra thing as they get close to the race just to test themselves to make sure that they're where they need to be. The race is the test, not in that week before the race or 2 weeks before the race. All that's doing is just maintaining all that hard-earned fitness that you've gained in the huge block of training leading up to it. 4-day taper for a short race or races that are pretty low priority. 10-day taper for sort of more important races, or especially if it's a half Ironman that you have coming up, a 70.3. It's very good to give yourself that 10-day stretch where you kind of cut back the weekend before for sure on the long stuff. And then the big taper for the big A races. Again, the average is going to be 4 weeks of tapering down, but the run starts 5 weeks out, gradually tapering down. The bike 4 weeks out, and the swim 3 weeks out. And one last thought. People ask me, well, how much should I cut back? Well, it really depends on where your peak is. If somebody has a long ride of 3 hours, let's say, and somebody who has a long ride of 5 hours, their progression down to the race is going to look a little bit different. Okay, so the less training you've done, the less the difference will be between your peak and where you end up in that week before the race. If you've done a huge amount of training, a lot of long workouts, a lot of intensity, your peak is at a very high point. So to get down to that fresh spot at the race, it's going to be a little bit steeper drop off week to week to get down to that really fresh point at the race, to have the race that is the best that you can do. So let me see if there's any questions in here. I hope that's given you some food for thought and things to think about. Let's see. If anybody has a question, you can type it in. Good to see everybody online here. Just looking. Wow, so many familiar names. I'm glad y'all were able to show up today. And if you know people that were not able to tune in, this stays live, recorded on the Zwift website, and also I'll be posting it on my YouTube channel, and also in the Mark Allen Coaching on the social wall in the coaching app. So stay tuned for that. Looks like not too many questions on this one. If you have any questions, or you have a race coming up and you're just not sure kind of which length taper to choose, especially if it's a medium priority race, whether you should choose 4 days or 10 days, feel free to email me, mark@markallencoaching.com. We can dialogue back and forth, and I can give my best suggestions on it. I felt like during my career, I was one of the reasons that I did do as well as I did is that I really did pay attention to tapering, and I never went into a race thinking, oh, I'm just going to train through this one, because I wanted a race to be something that it always signals that it's time to go to a different level, a new level, one that I will only go to in races. I didn't want a race to in any way be something that's like, oh, I'll just kind of go hard and see what happens. You need to learn how to manage that that anxiety, that anticipation, that excitement, and to get it in the right place. And the only way you can learn how to do that is if you go into each race saying, this is a race, and I'm going to do it. Okay. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you're all having a great weekend. Hope you had some fun workouts, or you're doing something fun with your family and friends. I will not be online for a live chat next week. I will be at Ironman Frankfurt in Germany. That should be really exciting. European Championship. A lot of incredible athletes racing there. I don't know if we'll ever see a field quite like you're going to see this year. So tune in live for that. I'm sure a lot of you will be. And then we'll pick it up from there. But anyway, thanks for stopping by. Mark Allen for the Mark Allen Coaching Zwift Group live chat from the shed here. And again, tune in every Tuesday on Facebook. I'll be posting for the next few weeks anyway, things you may not know. Take it easy, everybody.